Yeah.
Hi, sorry about your backstage access into the inner workings of the thing. Greetings, people in the internet world, and greetings, people in the present room, which is such an amazing treat. We've been teaching online so much in recent times. It's really nice to connect and look people in the eyeballs and hearts and receive that wisdom. I'm very fortunate. I guess I should just say I'm Gemini Brett, and I've been with astrology since I met Daniel Jamario, which was in 2012, just before I went to Peru to prepare for the beginning of the end of the beginning of the end of the thing. And shortly thereafter, I had a really beautiful rebirth with the cycling of the long count calendar and started studying with Daniel Jamario right here in the state of Arizona. So a lot of people in the room already heard this, but for those of you out here, it's a bit of a homecoming for me to be back here and to be with Daniel and with the school and tuning into this particular thread, this lineage, to be outside and be with the stars. And really honored to have this opportunity to present and share some thoughts and feels around the framework of the zodiac itself. The one other short story to tell, which some of you here have already heard too, it basically begins with, so I tried to change my own laptop battery. And you can basically finish the story on your own, meaning I've had some technical issues. And the slides I was gonna show today are now somewhere in the ethers. But interestingly, in fishing through the Rolodex of things I have created in the past, I found this one that we're going to start with. We might bounce around a bit. But this is a class that I built for my School of Earth Astrology. And yeah, I just kind of came across it this morning, and it turns out that it's the solar return of this presentation on the 17th, so it also feels timely. So yeah, I'm Gemini Brett from the School of Earth Astrology. Much of my school is inspired by the Turning of the Ages and the Turning of the Ages Mystery School and the Turning of the Ages framework that Daniel Jamario's brought in. And so we see here behind my school's logo, Galactic Center. And there's a visitor there. I wonder if anyone knows who that is. So this is Golden Time, Solar Days, Years, and Ages, part 2. So you don't have to worry so much about part 1 right now. There's actually a little bit of review of what that was along the way. That was a focus more on the houses, and today we're going to speak about the signs and then find our way back to the whole sign house system, right? What differentiates that from others and why it's a thing. So this is Golden Time, the Directional Zodiac, and the secondary motion. Part of the invocation of the Turning of the Ages Mystery School references these two great beings, Jehuti, who you may know as Thoth, and Seshet, the Lady of the Measuring Cord. These are images of the two from the Luxor temple in Karnak, land of Kemet. And here the two side by side at the temple of Seti, the first in Abydos. And yeah, I remember when I encountered this image, this is a photo I took, I just kind of started crying because Seshet is this kind of mysterious force that you actually don't see inscribed as much as certainly we do like Thoth. But it's just been, it's like one of the many mysteries, things that I've heard Daniel speak over time. It's like, oh, what's that? And to go take a look for, in a sense, this like the mind behind the mind, if you will, and the heart behind the heart. So this is an ancient image of Thoth, and we're gonna come into focus with a new artistic rendition. I wish I could say who created this piece. I wasn't able to find out. But I think, displays some of the mysteries of this great teacher being Jehuti, who many know as Thoth or Thoth or Tot or Thought. perhaps, and many in the astrological traditions compare to Hermes, or maybe Hermes Trismegistus. And there's some really important symbols of Thoth that we see here on this boat of the soul. So one is the crescent moon with the sun. And some believe that moon, or maybe even the kind of crescent shape of the beak of the ibis bird, which we often see Thoth displayed as, that this might reference Thoth as a moon god, but that was a different character. Why the moon with Thoth? Because he measured the days and followed the cycles of the sun and moon and the planets to bring to us, well, our craft and day-keeping calendars. So there's these two animals that often we see with Thoth, who are the baboon and the ibis bird. And they, to me, represent the two frames upon which the tropical zodiac is constructed. The baboon, speaking of the frame of day, because baboons rise before the sun, and they will actually compete for high ground, right? Whoever gets to receive the rays of the light first wins. And it's a great show. I really recommend finding some videos of this, right? It almost feels like a battle and then this amazing celebration of the sunlight, right? So sunrise, of course, this is the daily motion, right? Which in astronomy, it's called the primary motion, the rising, the reaching, the resting, and the rooting of the sun, I like to say. Or in astrology, we could say the movement of the sun and the movement of the planets and the movement of the signs through the houses. For the ibis, I believe this is about the secondary motion, which is the annual motion. The ibis bird is a migratory bird that flies south for winter, just as the sun does. And I should clarify, that's a northern hemisphere thing, okay? In the southern hemisphere, the sun flies north for winter, right? It's winter because the sun is literally further from us. So Egypt, as we know, is a northern hemisphere place, and the sun flies south for winter time. There's this interesting trip about Egypt, which is that northern Egypt was called Lower Egypt, and southern Egypt was called Upper Egypt. And it's often suggested the reason for this is that the Nile flows from the south to the north. The Nile, the lifeblood of Egypt. Its mouth at the Mediterranean Sea. But I feel this has so much to do with astronomy and following the sun. So I have to turn this around for it to work like a chart in Egypt, where we have the ascendant, what is rising on the east, and we know in astrology, we typically display that on the left side of the chart, yeah? In the northern hemisphere, or at least in all northern hemisphere locations north of Earth's Tropic of Cancer, like Egypt, the midheaven, where the sun finds its way at midday, halfway between sunrise and sunset, where the sun reaches its highest daily height, is due south, right? So the sun is up above the ground in the south when you're in Egypt. And then, of course, the sun sets in the west. And some of you heard me say this the other day, but I'm told that in Kemet they had no word for death. They said westing, for it was known that what wested and left our view would, after it went through the underworld down beneath the ground, would come back up and rise again in the east. And of course, the sun does this every day. And so does the moon. So does Sirius. So does Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn too, right? And in the northern hemisphere, at least in temperate northern hemisphere locations like in Egypt, in Arizona, the Imam Cheli, the IC, Imam Cheli meaning the bottom of the heavens, like hell, it's down in the north, due north down beneath our ground. I call that the roots, because like in the middle of the night, the sun roots down beneath the ground here in the north, and that's where sun begins his daily climb, rising in the east, reaching in the south, resting in the west, rooting in the north again at midnight. So you feel that lower in the north, right, and upper in the south. There's more clues to this, which is in Upper Egypt and Southern Egypt, the crown had the vulture, right? So a bird, an air being, and there's the red crown. So think about like the midday fire, especially in the deserts. And in Lower Egypt and Northern Egypt, right, which for me is down here at the IC, down beneath the ground, the crown was the serpent, right? And it's the white crown. So just importantly to say, once again, this is the astronomy, very basic primary direction, the spinning of the sky astronomy for the Northern Hemisphere. Flip this thing around for the Southern Hemisphere, and we're not going to do that here. We're going to keep our feet on the ground in the Northern Hemisphere. This animation in the great Stellarium astronomy software is cast for the Bay Area of California, where I live. So here we have the sun rising in the east and coming through this quadrant of the chart that reaches up to its height. So the moon would do this later. You can see the moon following the sun at this particular time, but this is midday. When the sun souths, it is the middle of the day, right? So not 12 on a clock. Like clock time is not natural time, but true solar noon, and it's halfway in time between sunrise and sunrest, the reaching of the sun on the meridian, right? So on our charts, the meridian passes through the MC and the IC, and it's a local north-south great circle, right? The north-south line, let's just look south at the reach, that divides the eastern side of the sky, which goes up, from the western side of the sky, which goes down. So I like look around here in the room. Does this landing for everyone? Does this feel natural to you? Okay, cool. Down beneath the ground, or so we believe, we'll never see, there are these two other quadrants, right? There's beneath the ground going down, there's beneath the ground coming up, and we have above the ground going up and above the ground going down, right? I'm going to take the atmosphere away, and we'll see that beautiful galactic center nearby and contemplate the turning of the ages. But I'm going to put some names on the screen after we draw in some lines of the wanderers, the planetas, right? The wandering stars. And it's going to be hard for some of you in the room, I think, to see, but just above the sun here is Venus. And then in the fourth quadrant, we see Moon and Jupiter and Saturn and Mercury and Mars. And when you look at the planets, right, obviously we wouldn't be able to do this when the sun is in the sky. It's a very important truth about the sun that I think is too often overlooked. And another thing that I've always appreciated about this paradigm's approach to honor sun is great mystery, right? When you watch the sky for some time, and I love that the Turning of the Ages Mystery School insists upon this, you understand why the original zodiacs were not solar, because you will never see the stars that currently host the travel of the sun. You will go blind trying, right? The original zodiacs followed the moon, which we can visibly see dancing through the stars, right? Well, when you look to Mars or Jupiter or Saturn, you see that at their own pace, they follow a similar path, right? And it's the path of the sun. And this, of course, we know is called the ecliptic plane, right? So from Earth's point of view, with our feet on the ground, the ecliptic is the heart of the zodiac. It is most officially the path of the sun in Earth's skies. And why? Because, of course, it's Earth's path about the light. So what I did here is just bring in the orbital paths of all the other planets that are on the screen. And I think this is the really important thing for us to know about our charts as well. We only show one circle. I like to call it the one ring that rules them all, and in the light binds them, to quote from Tolkien, with a little adaptation to honor the sun, right? We show the ecliptic plane. We show the plane of the Earth-Sun relationship. The moon has her own path. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and all the other of the solar systems cast, they have their own path, right? Their paths cross the sun's path at their nodes. But unless a planet is on its node, unless the moon is on her node, she's not on the ecliptic plane. She'll be above or below the ecliptic. And what we do in astrology is we project the heavenly body's position to the ecliptic plane. We say it lives at that zodiac degree, right? That longitude. So this ecliptic plane really is the framework for all zodiac cosmologies, the One Ring. And we're going to leave Earth now and look at this thing in a poor animation from outer space of Earth just wiggling around the sun in the course of a year, right? As Earth orbits the sun, right? You could think about like if we all stood up right now and just walked in a circle around this beautiful scene here, right? We'd be walking on this plane, right? The plane that the Earth walks in her annual dance about the sun is this ecliptic. We can extend that plane towards infinity in every direction. And what we find is that it is embraced by the constellations that we know as the zodiac. And that's what sets these 12 star groups apart from the others of the heavens. And why, regardless of how they've been drawn through different cultures throughout time, are special, because they host the travel of the planets. And this, I believe, everyone here already knows, but I just want to check in. Are there any questions, or does this all feel good so far? Good, cool. So we're going to watch this Earth travel about the sun. When the Earth is on this side of the sun is in the constellation of the Ram, right? And again, we're not going to see that, right? We will go blind. The Ram at this time is under the beams of the sun. But we will find as Earth orbits the sun, that from Earth's point of view, the sun is moving through these constellations. From a heliocentric or sun-centered cosmology, that's not actually what's going down, right? Earth's moving about the sun, and it's our perspective of the sun moving from one constellation to the next. And of course, that's an annual thing, yeah? So let's put the Earth in the center. Why not? We live on Earth. Shouldn't we both be most concerned with this place, right? And then what happens on Earth is we see sun moving through those same constellations each year. From the crab to the lion, to the priestess, to the scales, to the scorpion, to the archer, the sea goat and the water bearer, the fish, the ram, back to the bull, right? And I love that in this room at the Turning of the Ages Mystery School, I don't have to explain that we use different names for constellations than we do for signs, because constellations and signs are very different things. Would love for the astronomers of our day and age to understand this. We would have a lot less attacks at like family holiday gatherings, right? If you people don't even know that the zodiac doesn't work anymore because it's not what it was 2,000 years ago. And so we're going to look at some of the truths of the tropical zodiac, which many, when they come to the great challenge of learning that it is not a constellational device, really struggle, right? Then what is it? And so we can say, oh, it's a seasonal thing. But if that was true, wouldn't it have to be reversed for the Southern Hemisphere? Why wouldn't we call Peru's spring equinox the sun moving into Aries instead of Libra, right? The sidereal zodiac doesn't really have that same problem. But the seasonal zodiac, a lot of people then just kind of revert to, oh, it's just symbolic and move along, right? But I don't think it's necessary for astrology, but I'm very interested in, well, what is this thing and how the hell does it work? Or better said, how in the heavens does it work? What in the heavens is the zodiac? And what I've found in my path is it's actually something down beneath our feet. So let's have a look at that. I'm going to bring in some of the other wanderers here though, and then just take them away and we'll move on to this other image. So this is a ring, and those of you here at the Turning of the Ages Mystery School will see something, will know that it looks familiar to something you've seen before. There's going to be a little bit difference here because you'll see the earth in the center. And maybe some other slight modifications from a logo that at the Turning of the Ages Mystery School you're quite familiar with. But we're going to unpack now 3 different zodiacal cosmologies, like the great philosophies of what the zodiac is in our day and age. And many will say that the tropical zodiac is not astronomical because the tropical signs do not align with the constellations. What I aim to prove to you today is it's actually the most astronomical of these 3. All right, so what are the 3? Let's strip this thing down. And first, just talk about the constellational zodiac. So, I mean, in a sense, this is the astronomer's zodiac. And I'll include myself in that wrap when I'm outside. And like last night we were looking at Venus with the Pleiades. We were looking at Mars in the groin of Polydeuces, when they are actually Castor, the mortal twin. Right? This morning I saw Saturn with the sea goat, right? When I look to planets and the stars, I'm obviously referencing where they are through that appearance, that visible experience of the planet with a constellation, yes? I also know what degree of the zodiac of my choice, which is the tropical zodiac, these stars project to or exist within today. So I can have that reference that when Venus is with the Pleiades, that means Venus is right at the cusp of tropical Taurus and Gemini. Yeah. But I would never know that at night without having the constellations to refer to. So everyone that lands, right? So the constellational zodiac, I mean, it seems to make sense. And sidereal astrologers are like, what's wrong with you, man? You know, just look up. Mars is in Cancer. He's right there in the twins. Like, why wouldn't you call that Gemini? I mean, that's a great challenge to tropical astrology that we want to be able to face intelligently. And there is an intelligent response, right? But it is a confusing thing, right? When you look at Mars and you're like, wait a second, why does the chart say Cancer? And my astronomy app and my eyeballs say Gemini. And again, we say twins because constellations and signs are very different things. So constellations are constellations. I think that's a little easier to understand. They are these asterisms or ways that we connect the dots of the sky, right? Well, who gets to connect the dots? So the constellations on your screen are kind of a modern view of the quote unquote Western tradition, though much of it was founded in Sumeria, Accadia, Babylonia, India, maybe. I mean, there was a lot of cross-pollination of different cultures back in the day that I think astrology really helps us honor. And it's also a great mystery because so much of this history has been burned at the stake and whatnot by church and science. Yeah, but we're taking this back in a way that I think, as I like to say, we can reconnect to the poems whispered in times before the written word, is simply to get out there and to engage with the sky and to have an experience. But the sky has more questions than it has answers, right? And we all have tackled like the riddles and the challenge of feeling like we'll never know it all. Well, good. That's one of the most beautiful things about our craft. You can't know it all, right? And I think it's great when we get out in dark skies like we did last night, try to count or name all of those stars. And you'll never be able to. And hopefully that can release you from the pain of the need to master a thing. It ain't happening, right? And that, for me, opens the great portal to the sky mysteries, which is not the shame of I need to know this and I should know this and why do, it's awe. And so my favorite thing always when we get out and group outside, and I've just learned to not try to teach a thing for at least 20 minutes, is at the beginning, everyone just laughs and smiles like a child. That's the true way that you walk into the temple of the sky. I can't say that without crying every time, right? That's like a really important truth. I can't tell you how often I'm out with astrologers and like elders who are like kicking themselves because they don't understand which house this is or what constellation or what star that is. And they're just slamming the door shut, right? The way we open the door is through wonder and reverence. Yeah. Okay, stop crying now. I guess I have Mars in Cancer too. All right, so the constellational zodiac is maybe an easier thing, but here's a really important, I think, beautiful truth for us to like let land in our body mind right now. Constellations are terrestrial, right? Stars are celestial. Stars are in the heavens. But the way that we experience them in groups is completely earth-based. Not only that it's earthlings pointing there and earth culture is connecting the dots, but you know, what does Orion's belt look like from Betelgeuse? Orion's shoulder, obviously not a belt at all, right? Those stars that look so close to one another aren't close to one another. They're hundreds of light years apart from one another, right? This is a terrestrial thing. I mean, granted, if you go to Mars, and hopefully you will someday, it's great. The zodiac constellations are going to look somewhat similar, but very importantly, Mars has his own ecliptic. Mars has his own orbital path, you see? And you get out to other planets and the sun's not even in our solar system, the sun's not moving through the same constellations, all right? So the zodiac itself is very much an Earth device. Yeah, all right. And who gets to draw the lines and who gets to divide them and these kinds of things. And these days, a lot of astrologers, like for some reason, give their faith to the International Astronomical Union, who vehemently denies astrology, which is the weirdest thing to me. All right, so moving on. So the constellational zodiac, simply the 12 star groups that embrace the ecliptic plane. If we want to use these star groups, I can say 12. Some are trying to push this 13th sign crime. I'm not going to get down with that today, but I have a whole other world to get into that sometime if you'd like. So we have the ecliptic plane, which is embraced by these star groups, and therefore from Earth's point of view, the sun is always traveling through those 12 star groups. And because our solar system is relatively flat, so do Mercury and Venus and Mars and Jupiter and Saturn and the ones that we can't see with our naked eye too. And the moon snakes above and below the ecliptic plane, but she stays close within 5 degrees. Mercury and Venus stay within about 8 degrees of the ecliptic from Earth's point of view. And this is likely the source of another astronomer's definition of the zodiac, which is a band 8 degrees north and 8 degrees south of the ecliptic, because that band hosts the travels of the planets, right? So this is what the astronomers believe the zodiac is, because they burn the astrology books, right? And because they believe this is what the zodiac is, they don't understand that they're coming after astrology with a straw man argument. And for them, because our signs and these constellations don't align, case closed. No need to debate. Which frankly probably is a good thing, because if they start looking at some of the techniques I'm using, right, there's probably deeper philosophical issues with some of that stuff. And it's this way too. I think a lovely thing that I've been, I'm not wrestling, but dancing with recently is what came first, astronomy or astrology, right? And we can say, well, once they were one and the same, and that's how it always felt to me, but I don't think that's necessarily true. You know, I think astronomy is imperative for survival and more of a natural age before all the light switches and the hot water knob and all that stuff, right? Like whether you're an agricultural society or a nomadic society, you better live by the cycles of the moon and the sun, and especially the earth and the sun, right? So you start watching the planets moving through the sky so you can know how to keep time. So you can know where they need to be for the hunt, or when to plant the seeds and when to harvest and these things. And that's astronomy. That's not necessarily astrology, right? But the issue is, if you start keeping the cycles and keep watching the sky that intently, you're going to get turned on to the great mystery of the thing. It's impossible not to. And so the omens are born. You start noticing that when things are happening up there in the celestial realms, things are happening down here in the terrestrial realms, and you start noticing that things are happening in cycles, right? So for me, I think probably that reverence for the sky is very ancient, but that need to know also created this intentional following of the cycles, which really birthed the experience that we would call astrology. Really, what we call astrology is in a sense incorrect. Astrology is actually the rainbow bridge between two things: astronomy, the measurable heavenly happenings, and correspondences, the immeasurable quality of those quantities, right? And so astrology is those two things. Most astrologers just let JPL and whoever's creating the ephemeris and our softwares do all the astronomy and just give me the data, and I can put somebody's thing in the computer and cast a chart and know everything about their soul, right? But we want to take back that astronomical side, because the astronomers of our day and age, with their focus through these gigantic telescopes on some tiny piece of space far, far away and long, long ago, are kind of forgetting the back on the grass, wide open view of the whole sky, the big picture. And I really think that that's one of the great gifts of the Turning of the Ages Mystery School, right? My school as well, very much devoted to the actual visible observational experience. And I will say there's a preservation, there's a need for this, because astronomy more and more is less concerned, right? Okay. So the constellational zodiac, very importantly, features zodiac or ecliptic constellations that vary significantly in size. We astrologers are familiar with 12 30-degree signs. Divide the circle of 360 degrees into 12 equal parts, 30 degrees each. Well, the Priestess constellation describes 47 degrees of ecliptic arc. So what's the issue? That's more than a sign and a half worth of ecliptic, right? The mighty ram, 15 degrees. So significantly different these. Right? And so if you're going to keep a constellational zodiac, and I don't know, Daniel's taught me that there's whispers of ancient traditions that did. And I mean, you can see it's some in like the lunar mansion traditions from the desert and from India, the nakshatras, but even those tend to be equal divisions of the sky, right? The only kind of, I don't know, different size sign constellational cosmology I'm aware of comes out of Cosmo magazine and this recent 13th sign thing, right? And I look forward to learning about other cosmologies that were keeping just constellational and unequal signs. But it wasn't too long. Like there was a great Hellenistic astronomer called Geminos, who spoke about constellation signs and 12th part signs, right? So the constellations are unequal in size, the 12th parts are each 30 degrees. So this is something that goes all the way back to the beginning of our craft. So let's speak about the sidereal zodiac. Sidereal zodiac, or sidereal zodiacs, right? And when I say constellational zodiac, I should say constellational zodiacs, right? There's many, many ways to draw a line up there. What I see as a scorpion in Polynesia, it's Maui's fishhook. In some cultures in Australia, it's a parrot, right? And the Midwest here, it was the great trickster Nanibozo, right? Like, who gets to draw the lines and say which stars are what? So constellational zodiac is not accurate. Constellational zodiacs with like 1,000 S's, right? Same thing with the sidereal zodiac. There is no official sidereal zodiac. It is a philosophy, it is a cosmology, it is a technique, it is a mechanism where you take this circle, which like all circles is 360 degrees, this circle of the Earth and the Sun relationship, this ecliptic plane, and you pick a star to start with. And so there are many, many, many different what are called ayamnamshas, which are different sidereal zodiac cosmologies that start with different stars. I'll show you which star this particular one on the screen is aligned to. But importantly, these are 12th part signs. So what you see here in purple on the outside with the names of the signs written in, this is a sidereal zodiac. And I'll highlight here that sidereal Sagittarius, relatively aligned to the Archer constellation, which you can see in the kind of inner circle there, 30 degrees. The Scorpion's 30 degrees. You get a lot of the Scorpion and some of the Scales. The Scales has a whole lot of priestess feet, right? Because 47 degrees for the priestess. Like, part of that's going to have to go somewhere else. This star, which interestingly the astronomers call Alpha Virgo, right? It's the bright star of the Virgo constellation, which we call priestess because signs and constellations are different things. So you know it as Spica. Some say Spica. In India, Chitra. And there are many ayamnamshas of sidereal zodiac cosmology that are tuned to that star. And there's some beautiful myth of why that should be. But the way they tune to Alpha Virgo is it's the first degree of sidereal Libra. So I have had attacks not only by rationalist astronomers about the sign constellation misalignment in their point of view, but also from sidereal astrologers as well, who, again, when I'm outside looking at Cancer Mars in the twins, their argument is valid. But my response is, why do you begin Libra with Alpha Virgo? And then it's, oh, well, nothing could be perfect, right? I believe that having a heavenly cosmology is as important as having a terrestrial cosmology, and that our craft is about the marriage of the heaven and earth. And so working with the sidereal zodiac framework, or working with the constellation zodiac framework, working with the stars, working with the celestial realm is very important, but we also want to look from the terrestrial space.
In your own research on it, did you come upon the, I saw this at one point, that in the original Indian sidereal zodiac, they were using Alpha Piscean, the North Star.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. I haven't seen that one. I've seen so many, and actually tomorrow I'll be speaking about star alignments of DC, but we're not going to stay here in the States. We're going to kind of journey around, and I'll look at like a bit of a precessional device. I've created these 3 wheels in such a way that they're all independent and I can turn them, and we'll look at different precessional stars.
It always makes sense to me that would be a far less, that they wouldn't run into the same problem if they started Alpha Piscean is the first degree of their Pisces.
Right.
Run into the problem. That's what, according to what I saw, it was 2,000 years ago. They did that. It's only recently they converted this to Spica.
Yeah, it's an intriguing one because, as you know, it's not a bright star. So Al-Rishi, the knot. Yeah, I mean, and it's not right on the ecliptic plane either. I mean, that's the thing about Spica, as we know, very bright, brilliant. I mean, she just calls you in. There's something about that star. I don't usually look through telescopes or binoculars. Like, I like to use these lenses. But I went out to Joshua Tree with a friend, and she had big binoculars. That night, actually, I was initiated into seeing Uranus with my naked eye, and I saw Vesta that night too. But I also saw a Spica through binoculars. Changed me. It was good. It was like pink and purple dancing about. It was the thing that I really loved. I mean, there's something very beautiful about that star. And one thing a particular practitioner of Jyotisha, we would call it Vedic astrologer these days, told me is like, well, that's the feminine constellation, and so everything's coming in through the goddess. Right, and I really appreciated that idea of calibrating to that star. But as Daniel mentioned in his talk yesterday, there's some idea that the Antares, the heart of the scorpion, Aldebaran, the eye of the bull, axis should be in the middle degrees of their signs. Like there's just so many different sidereal zodiacs. Again, it's a cosmology. Where do you start drawing your circle? Does that make sense to everyone here in the room? Yeah, obviously you're in the Turning of the Ages mystery school. All right. There is only one tropical zodiac, right? Constellational zodiacs, arbitrary. Like doesn't mean wrong, but arbitrary. Sidereal zodiacs, arbitrary. Which star do you start with? And here at this school, why not start with the galactic cross? Which I think definitely makes the most sense, right? Still arbitrary, right? And you're going to have an argument about that. There's no argument about where the 0 degrees of the tropical zodiac is. Where it is in space, that causes some interesting debate and many other wonderful things that we'll look into a little bit. But importantly, the tropical zodiac, I will suggest, is actually the most astronomical, or perhaps even the only astronomical of the three. And again, I don't feel it has anything to do with something far away, but rather it's about a framework of something that exists, I believe, beneath our feet. And importantly, and this is kind of a weird thing to say, but the tropical zodiac has nothing to do with any star other than our own. It is about the relationship of Earth and Sun, which I know is matter and spirit. That doesn't, I'm not saying in any way, I mean, you've seen me outside. I'm not saying the stars in our sky do not, assist our energetic experience as Earthlings. I work with constellations like very deeply. That's also inherent to this school's cosmology, right? But what I'm saying is that the framework, the foundations of the tropical zodiac have nothing to do with any other star than our own. And that confusion, that the idea that what a sign is a star, like people say star signs, right? Right? Well, they should be saying sun signs, because the only star that matters in the tropical cosmology is our sun. It's about the relationship of Earth and Sun. And therefore we could say seasonal, but again, we have the issue of, Northern Hemisphere versus Southern Hemisphere, let alone Manila in the Philippines versus, Timbuktu versus Callanish in Scotland. These are all very different climates, right? So if the thing's seasonal, it shouldn't only apply to like one seasonal experience, yeah? All right, so let's look at the tropical zodiac. This is the alignment in our day and age. And I'm highlighting here, let me bring the tropical zodiac in. The truth that Spica or Chitra or Spica, Alpha Virgo being in some sidereal zodiac cosmology 0 Libra, that's kind of weird. Well, how about that Alpha Virgo is 24 Libra in the tropical zodiac? What do you do with that? Right? It's just a strange thing. Of course, the tropical zodiac, like the sidereal cosmology or framework, is 12 equal division signs, 12 signs of 30 degrees each, yeah? But this is in our day and age, and we know this changes with the great year and the third motion of Earth, the precessional motion. But here we're looking at tropical Libra. You can see that I'm using the glyphs on the inner blue ring here to depict the tropical zodiac. In tropical Libra, it's like all priestess with no scales in sight. Here's tropical Scorpio, scales and priestess feet, right? The Scorpion is in tropical Sagittarius in our day and age, and that's going to change. So this is the dawning of the age of Capricorn that you're looking at on the screen right now, all right? And then, which is a good, 2,200 years into the future almost, or maybe longer depending on your framework, tropical Sagittarius will be scales and priestess feet, right? So as we know, and just to kind of reiterate and very deeply emphasize, the tropical zodiac has nothing to do with any stars other than our own. So then what in the heavens is it? My friends, it is a directional device. Like so many systems of ancient wisdom traditions, the tropical zodiac is a device of Earth's cardinal directions. This is the primary motion of Earth, which is the daily rotation of our planet. About this pole, right? Which emanates from the heart of Gaia, from the center of Earth, passes through her terrestrial poles, Santa's place, and points to the celestial poles up in space, all right? This is an imaginary axis. It's probably not something there, but if the Earth was a tire going down the road, this would be the axle. You get me? And it defines, this is really important, the rotational motion, the daily motion, which brings you such hits as sunrise and sunset. This motion defines the cardinal directions. I'm not talking about magnetic north and south. Those things migrate. Some even say that they reverse over time. So I'm talking about true north, true south, okay? Defined by the rotation of our planet. The world tree is a name that probably could be used. And I think those stars that we decorate trees with sometimes represent all the stars in the sky. That tree sometimes is leaning away from the light. That's typically when trees are decorated like this, yeah? When the southern axis of the Earth is leaning towards the sun, this is winter time in the northern hemisphere, right? This is Christmas time. This is, as we say, as tropical astrologers, the sun ingressing tropical Capricorn. And I think this is a really wonderful retort if you're being engaged with by a rationalist who is telling you that your zodiac does not work because signs and constellations don't align. You say, hey, where on earth does the sign shine directly above on December 21st? And if they know, they will say the Tropic of Capricorn. When the sun moves into tropical Capricorn, the sun shines directly above the Tropic of Capricorn. So Cosmo magazine with their 13th sign wrap, which came out of, by the way, this article that NASA wrote to program children at their space place page, their educational place for children, right? That's when that whole kind of debacle happened of all this 13th sign wrap. And there's a bunch of astrologers today who are doing that thing, which to me is just so weird, but to each their own. I try to say, but you know, they'll say that in our day and age, hey, you know, like that's Sagittarius. Look at the Cosmo magazine calendar, man, December 21st. And indeed, if we could see through the sun, we would find it at the time in our day and age on December solstice, which I will call southstice, as we will see, then the sun is actually held by the constellation of the Archer that they know is Sagittarius, right? So they'll call that time Sagittarius, and I say, oh, well, why don't you call this band 23.5 degrees south of Earth's equator the Tropic of Sagittarius then? And they typically be like, what do you mean? That has nothing to do with anything. It's like, okay, you should learn some astronomy, right? And I'd be happy to show you some if you want to like chill out a little bit and have a conversation, right? I have been in like late night conversations at parties, literally with like JPL astronomers who have attacked me because they found out I was an astrologer. And an hour later, and with them having a few drinks because I'm not there anymore, I'm like a straw sticking out of an orange and showing them the pole of the Earth. And then they're like, oh, wait, oh, that's a thing. It's like, okay, let's look at your chart. and let's see how much of a thing it is, right? But of course, it's rare, and we don't need to fight with people who are completely closed mind or closed in the heart. But I do think that sometimes walk away is the best advice. But other times, if people are close, why not engage? But we want to be armed with the knowledge. Right? When the sun ingresses tropical Capricorn, sun shines directly above Earth's Tropic of Capricorn. It's a really good thing to hold, okay? Where do you think the sun shines directly above when it ingresses Cancer? The Tropic of Cancer. And at equinox time, the sun shines above the equator. I'm getting ahead of myself. I don't usually talk that long. I actually stop the spinning of the Earth. So the shadow is a big piece of this shadow and light, right? And this is the seasonal thing. When the north pole of Earth in our annual orbit about the sun is leaning away from the light, then we have more shadow in the northern hemisphere. In fact, the sun never rises at all north of the Arctic Circle at that time, never sets at all south of the Antarctic Circle at that time, right? Winter solstice in the southern hemisphere, summer solstice in the southern hemisphere, winter solstice in the northern hemisphere, right? And we try to be non-inclusive. No, we try to be inclusive. That's how you say that, right? And we don't want to say summer solstice because that's a hemispheric thing, right? So what do you call it? Do we call it December solstice? Well, then you're like stuck in that whole Gregorian matrix, man.
How about southern solstice and northern solstice?
There we go.
That makes sense for me.
Absolutely, because the tropical zodiac is a directional device. This is solstice. You see how the south pole of Earth is leaning towards the light, yes? And that's one of the very important keys of the tropical zodiac is a directional device. Solstice. All right, so winter, spring, summer, and fall. Let's move here. And this is now spring equinox time. Oh, sorry, east equinox time. And we'll see more of why. But at this time, it's not like Earth's tilt changed, right? You can see here in this animation, obviously not to scale. I'm learning. I didn't think I would become an animator just to teach astronomy, but it's happening. And I'm getting better, but they're pretty rudimentary as we can see. But importantly, just notice that the north pole of Earth is still leaning towards the right of the screen, okay? But at this point, the sun shines directly above Earth's equator. And then we'll move on and we can see the shadow game playing right now. When the sun ingresses tropical Cancer, the sun shines directly above Earth's Tropic of Cancer. Maximum light in the northern hemisphere, maximum shadow in the southern hemisphere, right? Northstice, which doesn't have that solstice ring to it. I agree, but still, that's the trip, right? The northern axis of Earth is leaning towards the light. This is why we have more sun. Now, a lot of the delineations that many astrologers teach are very sun-focused, yes? Like people will say, for example, that the sun is the domicile lord of the sign of Leo. That's like the ancient Hellenistic poetry. These days, people say the sun rules Leo, right? And they'll teach because it's the hottest time of year. We'll say that to somebody in Tasmania. This is not true, right? So do all those rules need to be rewritten or forgotten, or what might that be, right? I mean, there's a lot of interesting challenges that come in here that I think we shouldn't run away from, that we should consider. But what I can say for sure is that when the sun is in tropical Leo, whether you're in Tasmania or Timbuktu, the sun is northwest from Earth's center. So let's continue on here, and now we get to west equinox, the sun ingressing tropical Libra, equinox time, right? And so we talk about equal day and equal night, and this idea of equality, and you can feel those scales of balance, and you know, the kind of historical, probably astronomical, like impetus that brought that sign on board. But then people will project that same trip onto a Libra moon, right? Well, the moon can be in Libra any month of the year, agreed? In fact, will be in Libra every month of the year, right? So it can be winter time with some really long nights, and the moon's in Libra. It's not like the moon brings you equal day and equal night. But in the tropical zodiac, this does mean that the moon, we can't say exactly because the moon's not on the ecliptic, but typically north or south of the ecliptic, but at the time when the moon's at that equinox cusp, it will be above the ground for 12 hours and below the ground for 12 hours too, right? But a lot of the seasonal suggestions that people will take from the sun and then imprint onto the other planets, like it's kind of a weird jump. It's a weird leap. Do you see what I mean? Like just because Venus is in Cancer, or let me use a better example, maybe because the sun could be anywhere when, you know, we have Pluto and Aquarius here and we're moving towards summertime, right? I don't even know how to finish that sentence, but you all know how I would if I could. All right, let's carry on. So importantly, you know, we are here on Earth. So yes, the sun, when the Earth is in this place of our annual orbit in the south pole of Earth, is leaning towards the sun ingresses tropical Capricorn and shines directly above Earth's Tropic of Capricorn. We're looking on Earth. So where is the sun? And tropically speaking, the sun is at the cusp of Sagittarius and Capricorn, right? A good amount of my work has really unfolded in recent years, and I don't think we'll have time today to do much of this. We'll see some. But by showing that these glyphs that we use to depict the signs hold the codes of tropical astronomy. Importantly, they don't go back to the Hellenistic tradition, and I've never found anyone who really knows when these glyphs came into use. Sometime in the medieval kind of Renaissance period, it seems. But I'm wondering if you can see in the Sagittarius glyph a picture of astronomy. Let me bring it a little closer. Do you see what I see? The Earth leaning 23.5 degrees. Yeah. The equator would be that perpendicular line on the arrow. You see? So, I mean, I can do this, by the way, with 10 of the glyphs now. 2 of them are still mysterious. Of course, one of those being Scorpio. And we just respect that about Scorpio and move along, right? All right. The Capricorn glyph, yeah, I guess I could show you in another way. So when sun ingresses tropical Capricorn, sun shines directly above Earth's Tropic of Capricorn. If you feel like that's redundant, you're right, but I've learned that redundancy is built into every great space mission. And we want to look at these things from many different points of view so it can really kind of land in our soil. So pardon me if it feels too slow or too tedious. Here's the sun in Capricorn, and I'm just going to show the signs kind of in a different view. This would be declinations, by the way, which is for those of you who understand declination, which is a measurement north or south of the celestial equator. We can also call the tropical zodiac a declinational device. So let's look at declination here in what I call the solar serpent. I'm going to break down that illustration at the top of the screen because it's kind of a lot to look at. But for now, let me just say that it's obviously geocentric, Earth-centered, right? The blue plane that you see is the equator. And that's the plane of our primary motion, of our daily spin. Does that make sense? Right? This Earth is spinning on the axis, and so the equator is the plane of that rotation. The ecliptic is on a different plane. And they are displaced by 23.5 degrees. The tropical zodiac is completely based upon the interface of the planes of year and planes of day, the ecliptic and the equator. And that's it. Yes. And let me say it a little bit later because I'm going to break this down and then build it back up. For now, let me just show this in this illustration. You can see the sun over there and left at the Capricorn glyph. At this time, the sun is furthest south of Earth's equator. That's the Tropic of Capricorn. That's the southern bounds of the sun. Daniel and I just taught this whole lunar standstill seminar and talked about the out of bounds moon and out of bounds planet. So if a planet is south of the Tropic of Capricorn, it's out of bounds. because the bounds of the ecliptic, the bounds of the sun's path, are the Tropic of Capricorn, the Tropic of Cancer. Just every year it's snaking back and forth. So that little sine wave you see down there at the bottom of the screen is showing you that. The axis that says 0 degrees declination is the equator. And we have signs that are north of the equator. Those are Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo. And then we have signs that are south of the equator: Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces. So there are literally northern signs and southern signs. Now, you can't say that about the constellational zodiac. You can't say that about the sidereal zodiacs. This is a truth of the tropical zodiac. All right. So here, the sun ingressing Capricorn, that's the furthest south, right? And then the goat begins climbing the mountain. And that might kind of be a hemispheric thing to say, but still, this declination, which is the distance north or south of Earth's equator, I mean, you can see here in this illustration, right, that the ecliptic, it snakes above and below the equator. And that's what I call the solar serpent. So we're going to see the sun here, it's most south at Capricorn time, above Earth's Tropic of Capricorn, and then through the signs of Capricorn and Aquarius and Pisces, it's coming back up to the equator. Does that make sense? Then at the equator, the declination is 0. At equinox time, whether it's east equinox or west equinox, the declination of the sun is 0 because it's passing over Earth's equator. It's on the cross. Oh, wait, what? How did Christ get on the screen? Sorry about that. Maybe we'll get back to that. Okay, so here's the sun shining above the Tropic of Capricorn, and then we get into Aquarius time, which is less south. I swear I'm clicking this thing. There we go. Aquarius, right? So you see the sun shining in declinations less south, closer to the equator. Here's Pisces. And of course, through Pisces, the sun is going to find its way to the equator. Now, you saw in that other illustration, like why that's happening. All right, but this is another important way that you can see the signs is from this declination kind of point of view. Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces are south. And the sun is south of Earth's equator when it's in those signs. The moon is south of Earth's equator when it's in those signs. Jupiter is south of Earth's equator when in those signs. Aries, Taurus, and Gemini take us to the Tropic of Cancer, the northern bounds, okay? And then we stop and turn around. So the sun stops. What's the word for that? Nice, thank you. Danielle, I like that you played by your own rule there, right? I mean, like last night, you invited people who knew the answer right away not to respond. Right. And I was just wondering if your voice would be the first that I would hear when I asked a question whose answer you taught me. And you stayed mum and let your students answer, which I very much appreciate.
What was the answer?
Solstice is Latin for the sun stops. But we could also say the zodiac stops. It stops moving north and it starts moving south.
I will say that when I was in my 20s or 30s, I made it a point to be the first one to answer. No longer. Because I wanted to impress the teacher.
I'll just say my 30s was a long decade then. But I'm finally learning. Yeah, and then tropics, right? Like the tropical zodiac, the Tropic of Cancer, the Tropic of Capricorn. This comes from a Greek word, which is tropikos, which means turnaround, right? So solstice happens at the tropics, right? The sun stops and then turns around and starts moving in the other direction. So I'm talking about the sun because it's the framework of the tropical zodiac, but this happens for the moon too. When the moon's moving from Capricorn to Cancer, as she does every month, she's moving from her southern extreme to the northern extreme where she'll stop and turn around and start heading south. And in the northern hemisphere, you'll see like a Cancer moon any time of the year is really high in your sky because Cancer's closest to us, right? Everyone's had the experience where you walk towards a building and it seems like the building's getting taller. You know what? It's not. It's actually not. It's not getting taller, okay? So in this case, the building's walking towards you, right? And it seems like it's getting taller as well. So as the moon is literally getting closer to Arizona, the moon appears to be going higher in the sky. And the highest full moon is when? Right? Capricorn sun. Cancer full moon on the opposite side. It's going to be, you get, when you have the low sun, you have the high full moon. Yeah? Because Cancer is a northern sign. It's the most northern sign. It's actually not, because it's tied with Gemini. The difference is Gemini takes us out to the extreme with the who, what, why, when, where. And Cancer's like, okay, chill out, dude. Like, bring it back down, right? Cancer's actually when we start coming back down, which I think is a really important thing to know. All right, so let's do that here. Cancer, Leo, Virgo, bringing us back to the equator, and then Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius are southern signs. So in the northern hemisphere, when the sun's in Scorpio, right, we have much longer nights than days because the sun is literally further away. And it's just a really, I think, wonderful way to start understanding like your relationship with these beings. Sometimes they're close and sometimes they're far. And it's the tropical zodiac, not sidereal zodiacs, not constellational zodiacs, that teach us about that. They also teach us that when the sun is at 15 degrees Taurus, it casts the same length of shadow as the sun at 15 degrees Leo. The difference is Taurus is going further north and Leo is coming back from the northern extreme. Do you see that here too? You know, there's something I have to do to make this a little bit more accurate, which is this. You see the equinox signs. And by the way, there's 4 of them. Pisces is equinox as much as Aries is. Virgo is equinox as much as Libra is. Yeah? It's their cusps that are equinox. Does that feel right? Mm-hmm. There are 4 solstice signs. Gemini takes us all the way out. Cancer takes us back home. Sagittarius takes us all the way out. Capricorn's like back to the tribe. You have responsibilities. You feel me? Those are all solstice signs. And why the squeeze at the solstice and the stretching at the equinox? Because the sun's got to stop and turn around. And you know that exercise when you run fast in one direction, you stop and turn around and run the other way? Like, when are you moving fastest? Right in between the turnaround points. That would be like equinox. You see that? When you're moving slowest, you're literally stopped at the solstice place. All right. So I can take those same directions and map them on a compass. You and I all learned the compass like this. It's actually one of the things that makes it most difficult to understand the framework of a chart for the Northern Hemisphere, where like Egypt, south is upper, right? So let me flip this thing around. It's going to be a little easier for you who study in modern astrology systems that tend to put Aries the first house and Taurus the second, like that. You see it, right? Because with south on high here, south upper, north lower, we have east, or the ascendant on the left-hand side, and the cusp of east equinox. I'm going to turn it this way just because that's how this animation looks. All right, so let's go through the zodiac, and I'll take you at least to the next slide, which has the beautiful music of the beautiful John Dumas, and then we'll take, I think, a little mind break. So here we have the sun ingressing tropical Capricorn, shining directly above Earth's. They all yelled Tropic of Capricorn, right? Importantly, north, right? Earth's rotational axis defines the cardinal directions. So in this particular animation, not to scale, north is to the right of your screen. Somebody please play along. Which side of the screen would have south? The left side, thank you. All right. Yeah, this feels a little bit more like a science class than astrology typically does. So we have north to the right and south to the left, okay? So the earth sees the sun south here. And when I say that, by the way, I'm not talking about, South Africa, which you can see on the globe there, or Egypt, or even places in the nighttime. Because Earth has a north and south pole, the center of Earth, which is actually the place where we measure astrology from, has directions. The center of the Earth, it's probably not night or day or winter or summer from a seasonal experience. Do you feel me? But there is a directional reality at that center of Earth. You know, we need to be in our bodies. You all look comfortable, but if you would, everybody stand up with me, please. Everyone out there online, stand up with me too. Alwyn, is there any way to know where people are in the world just by looking at names? That would be helpful to know. So everyone, please open it up, stretch, take some breaths. Reach your hands directly above your head. Point to the zenith directly above your head. When any name. Who we have?
Honey? Winter?
From where? All right, well, let's make some shit up. Someone right now is watching us from England where it's nighttime. And somebody's watching us from Hawaii where it's a few hours. They are now, just like us, standing up and pointing directly above their head. Do you agree that they would be pointing to a different star than we are?
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay, now everyone, please keep your arms up, but bring your consciousness down through your spine, down through your feet, all the way to the heart of your mother, all the way to the center of Earth. Connect there. Our friends in England and Hawaii just found you in that same place. Now, if you will, please bring that energy from the center of Earth up into your heart as you bring the energy from the heart to the sky down to your heart and meet with your hands in prayer and marry the above and below. It was right here in Arizona. You may be seated. It was right here in Arizona where I came down to bring some folks out to a blood moon. And at first I was pretty sad about it because the lunar eclipse is a full moon, right? So I was living in Seattle at the time where we were lucky if we got one star. And I came down here a bunch and would see the Milky Way and everything. It was my first time coming down at full moon time. And it was like, oh, man. It's like the moon just ate the sky and there's no Milky Way because the moon's so bright. And I taught a whole eclipse thing, and then we were out at the fire and I was drumming and we were all talking story and story because the eclipse started at 3:30 a.m. At least according to me, because that's what I saw on my chart. And then it turned out, believe it or not, that the astronomers were right and that it was off by like 24 minutes, I think it was. Let me get back to that. The cool news for us experientially is when the dragon ate the moon and she turned blood red, moving through Earth's shadow, then the Milky Way popped out. And the planet, like all the stars and planets got so bright. It was the coolest experience. So on one level, when you're going to go watch a lunar eclipse, you don't need to go to the dark sky space because it's a full moon anyway. But to have that experience where it's so bright and then not so bright, it's really magical. So go do that sometime. Anyway, so what I learned that night and why my astrology chart was off from what the astronomer said is that my astrology chart wasn't measuring from the surface of the Earth where I was standing. Or, probably, I'm not sure about the rest of you, but I was actually born also on the surface of the Earth in Boston, Massachusetts, not at the center of the Earth. We measure astrology from the center of the Earth, not from the surface. And look, the moon's actually the only one who's close enough to change signs. If you've looked into this, it's called the parallax moon, or geocentric, which is Earth center, versus topocentric, which is Earth surface measurements. and the moon's close enough to actually make a little bit of a difference. So when I first found that out, I was like, wait, what? That seems wrong. Why would we measure a birth chart from the center of the earth, not the place where the baby's born? And then I realized, no, it's not my experience of the heavens. It's my experience of Earth's experience of the heavens. Yeah? And so when an eclipse is happening, it's a power, y'all have seen eclipses, they're powerful to see. Well, they are powerful if they're on the other side of the planet and you can't see them at all. Why? Because you are experiencing the planet experience, the heavens. It's truly as above, so below. We are measuring the happenings in the celestial realms from the heart of Gaia in the deepest terrestrial place, where we all connect, where we are all one, not just you and me and our friends in England and Hawaii, but all of the squirrels in the trees and the bunnies named after stars. Yeah? All right, cool. So let's get back to this illustration. Here we have the sun ingressing tropical Capricorn, shining above Earth's Tropic of Capricorn, south of Earth center. And now we'll move here to east equinox time. And you see why I call it that. Now, east is a little harder than south, right? Like, south is south. It's towards the south pole of Earth. And that's true for Australia and Timbuktu. East is a little trickier, right? What's rising here right now rose in, I don't know, Florida some hours ago and won't rise in the Philippines for, how long was your flight? What's your jet lag? 10 hours or so.
13-hour flight to Los Angeles.
Good golly. Yeah, for some time. Do you see what I mean? Like east and east is like a very like personal and relative thing. However, because Earth, our planet, has north, has south, she has this axis that leans 23.5 degrees in respect to her orbital path. She also has an east and west. She has a global east, a global west. You see how that is? And when the sun is seen from Earth because of Earth's dance, moving from tropical Pisces to tropical Aries, the sun is due east of Earth center. So this is a very important truth, not only of the directional zodiac, but of much of kind of the roots of, I'll say ancient and also modern astrological systems too. All right, so now Earth's going to see the sun move through Aries, Taurus, and Gemini until it's at the northern extreme. The sun ingresses tropical Cancer. It shines directly above the Tropic of Cancer, right? And we keep moving about the sun and experiencing the sun moving through these directional signs. Here we are with the sun ingressing Libra, and this is why I call it West Equinox. And you can see it in the Libra glyph, which is the setting sun, the true image of the south, of the West. Yeah? So Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius are all southern signs that are southwest of Earth center. The tropical zodiac is a directional device. Now, very importantly, it's not out there. It's not constellational. It is not only measured from a place beneath our feet, but it is there. It is housed there as well. I'm convinced that unlike kind of a celestial or sidereal, which means of the stars cosmology, that it's not about these energies coming to us from the sky. It's about something below our feet heading out there. And that actually, it goes both ways. There's like a terrestrial and a celestial, and we want to meet in the middle by honoring both, which is what we are up to here, right? Does this feel like a good time for a break and go worship the sun outside for a little bit and come back in? Cool. Yeah, let's do that. Awen, do you put on a slide, or do I, or how do we want to do it for the folks studying from other lands?
You have a slide.
I do.
How many minutes?
10 minutes.
10-minute break. Where were we? Slide 61.
I can make one.
Yeah, well, I can just put this on until the meantime, and then you can hijack my screen share, okay? And let me mute this thing.
That's really excellent, and